Ferit, could you just wait a moment? We're not live on Facebook yet. I'm just setting up. I'll introduce you. So I'd like to welcome Ferit Hysa today to our EYSIER SIG meeting, and I'd like to give him a very warm welcome. Today he will be talking about reflecting on how we can develop relationships with children, and particularly focusing on the attachment theory and thinking through how we can use that in curriculums using a blueprint for character development for evolution. So I'll hand over to you, please, Ferit.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My presentation keynote is for facilitating self-reflection through talk to build children's confidence and well-being and their capacity to set goals to cope with and manage change and uncertainty in communities of all faiths and none in a secular society using ABCDE. Attachment and relationship give impact positive to outcomes in pupils. It is necessary to make an investigation to know and evidence how these theories are known and practices in Albania and what is practice utilized or need to be done for future. Caring for children has a special focus, especially at an early age. This caring is traditional and general and has a good connection of parents and caregivers of children, and it gives good results in growth, adolescence, and learning outcomes. But it is not institutional education and awareness. There are a large number of children who lack connection and relationship from an early age, and they have consequences in adolescence as well as in learning outcomes. Identifying knowledge of relationship theory in child caregivers would help to determine future measures. What are the knowledge and understanding of caregivers for attachment theory and relationship? What are the practices utilized to early child age related to attachment and relationships? Psychological services that are able to include attachment theory in teacher training and provide help to teachers in classroom are not part of Albanian education landscape. These psychological services has also been reduced in UK, and this is growing trend in other nation states. The roles of educational psychologists often focus on writing education health care plans. See Brandley Adams and Taysom 2021 in Journal of Groundwork Cases and Faculty of Judgment and AlisonTaysom.com. This prevents teacher being able to describe and understand attachment theory and why it is important to understand in the learning and teaching. Attachment is an emotional bond with other person. Bowlby believed the early bonds formed by children with their caregivers have a tremendous impact that continues throughout life. He suggested that attachment also serves to keep the infant close to the mother, thus improving the child's chances of survival. Attachment is characterized by special behavior in children, such as seeking proximity to the attachment figure when upset or threatened. The most children enjoy life and are successful in school and in relationships. This lasts into adult life, but a significant minority struggle from an early stage and especially in adolescence. These children can be unfocused, disruptive, controlling, withdrawn, destructive. These children tend to underachieve in school and are often punished and even excluded. Little that school do seems to work. What are the risk factors affecting attachment? The following factors may present a risk to the quality of attachment between child and parents: poverty, parental mental health difficulties, exposed to neglect, domestic violence, or often forms of abuse, alcohol, drugs taken during pregnancy, multiple home and school placements, premature birth, abandonment, family bereavement. But what are the vulnerable groups? Vulnerable groups may include children in areas of social and economic deprivation, children in care, adopt children whose early experiences of trauma continued to affect their lives, disabled children, children with medical conditions or illness, children who have moved home frequently during the early years, for example, forces families, refugees, and children who have been traumatized by conflict or loss. As a result, these children may not fulfill their potential as adults, either in employment or relationships. These adults who enjoy success in school can find these children hard to engage and motivate. Research shows that a child's ability to form relationships and to learn is shaped by the child's early experiences. So, if we can better understand why and how some children behave the way they do, we can then find ways to help them enjoy and succeed in their education. It is a fascinating area of research with major implications for how the schools support all children to success. The nature of a child's primary attachment to caregivers lay the foundations of social emotional well-being and therefore children's capacity to learn. Secure attachment relationship correlate strongly with higher education, higher academic attainment, better self-regulation, and social competence. Educators themselves need to establish an attachment-like relationship with their pupils, particularly with challenging and vulnerable people, in order to enhance learning opportunities for all. Nurturing adult attachment provides children with protective, safe havens and secure bases from which to expose and engage with others and their environment. Early caregiving has a long lasting impact on development, the ability to learn, capacity to regulate emotions, and form satisfying relationships. Attachment is crucial to children's psychological welfare and forms the basis of personality development and socializations. Teacher, youth worker, and significant adult in a child's life can provide important attachment for children. The biological function of attachment is survival. The psychological function is to gain security. The interaction between the teacher and the pupil and the learning task is a fluid dynamic whereby the task is a reflection of the teacher's awareness and understanding of the pupil, and the pupil is able to seek reliable support when challenged by the task. Each relates to the other in a way that fosters curiosity and supports the uncertainty that can be created by the challenges of not knowing, which is at the heart of all learning. It is widely accepted that high quality early childhood education and care supports positive development outcomes for a child. A growing body of literature suggests these outcomes are influenced by the quality of relationships and early childhood experiences in early years settings and highlights the importance of the children's relationship with consistent educators to ensure they feel safe and secure in their caregiver substance. The development of attachment theory is important because it provides a way to understand how secure attachment in early childhood can support children's future brain development. An infant's brain is shaped by their early experiences, and the quality of these experiences has a substantial effect on development. Attachment relationships play an important role in supporting children to develop to their potential and influence future physical and mental well-being. It is widely accepted that high-quality early childhood education and care supports positive development outcomes for children. A growing body of literature suggests these outcomes are influenced by the quality of the relationships and early childhood experiences in early years setting and highlights the importance of children's relation with consistent educator to ensure they feel safe and secure in their caregiver substance. Research suggests these attachment relationships are developed through a combination of both quality of ECEC and infant toddler educator interactions. And consequently, there is an increased focus on the infant toddler educator relationship and an attention to the quality of infant toddler setting. In this regard, I find that in Albania, there is a lack of special institutions and programs in development of attachment theory. In this context, it will investigate to educators about the knowledges and understanding of attachment theory and what practices utilized they used. The development of attachment theory is important because it provides a way to understand how secure attachment in early childhood can support children's future brain development. An infant's brain is shaped by their early experiences, and the quality of these experiences has a substantial effect on development. Attachment relationships play an important role in supporting children to develop to their potential and influence future physical and mental well-being. I think that attachment theory is very important for success to children, but building the confidence is also very important to continue at school and this influence to high results. To give the confidence to people is to build a special relationship according to cognitive psychology to build real climate of learning. To give confidence, to build confidence, would say to demonstrate beliefs to the children that they will have success and have possible to have success. This is a strong key of teacher to organize the learning situation. Early intervention, next steps 2021. We propose a blueprint for character development for evolution, ABCD. A. Ask good questions. B. Search the best that has been thought and set for different perspectives to address the questions. C. Develop methods to gather data to understand what is currently happening. D. Develop change strategies using the data and test for proof of concept. E. Identify emerging principles from the change strategy that aligns with rule of law and human rights. The next slide reveals a progressive framework for assessing character development and relationship with the self and the others. Thank you for your invitation, for your attention.
Thank you, Professor Ferit. I think your presentation is really important. And we do have some questions that were sent in, and I know the people who are participating have their own questions. As you move through ABCDE, we can see that there are issues to do with group work and people working together. And that was also part of Maya Minalte, who's with us today, and Mesa and Daniela Canfrota and my paper on reading Italian, English, Lebanese and Iraqi policy through Mesa's framework of critical thinking. And so if we're looking at group work and we see children in schools sitting next to each other in parallel.
Miss, can I go? My balls hurt really bad.
Yeah, sure.
My balls, they hurt. They're in, okay, thank you.
I think we have that. That's hacker Allison. So just I think we've been hacked. So just get rid of it.
No, I invited him in. He registered for it. So basically, I think what we're trying to say with ABCDE is that if we can look at group work as opposed to people being in parallel and sitting next to each other in isolation, after COVID-19 and a kind of a long time of isolation and a year of isolation, as it were, I saw OECD is recommending that we look at addressing mental health and those sorts of issues. And I also saw that they have a recommendation for Scottish education policy in terms of aligning the institutional structures with clear ownership for the curriculum for excellence and the 4 elements that are made up there. And they're looking maybe at a specialist standalone agency to monitor and develop assessment for learning. And I think the issue is, how do we balance autonomy in the classroom if people need to perhaps understand attachment theory and understand how relationships can be built through nurturing relationships in group work, as opposed to being more knowledge intensive in delivering knowledge with children sitting in rows next to each other? Because we're going to actually need to change the infrastructure of the classroom in the way that the children are sitting and facing each other and making eye contact and communicating, as opposed to everybody facing a whiteboard and a teacher and not seeing each other. And I think that, you know, when we're looking at assessment outcomes, I think we need to ensure that the children's well-being is put first, that we are developing relationships that they feel safe, that they feel confident, that they feel comfortable. And those are the foundations for which learning can take place. So I'm just wondering what colleagues might think is how and in what ways might whole class teaching develop relationships between children in groups in class, and what kind of support do teachers need if they've got whole class teaching but they're going to be doing it in groups, and how might an inquiry approach help with that in terms of assessment?
Can I come in?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm now noted what you were saying about the Scottish education system, and obviously this has been a recent announcement about changes in the way in which monitoring will take place. Probably for colleagues, it's probably worth saying that in the past there have been 2 separate organisations, one Entitled Education Scotland and the other the Scottish Qualifications Agency. And there's been a recent OECD study which has been accepted by the Scottish Government, which agrees that the nature of the setup within the Scottish Qualifications Agency isn't necessarily working as well as it should, and that there will be changes that will take place to address that. However, what I was thinking about was something, and you'll forgive me if I go back into my past, which was with an organisation that reflects the interests of local government in Scotland, which is responsible for education. There was a piece of work which was done, and in part I thought it was a sensible thing, but only in part because it was reflecting on measures which I thought were not necessarily helpful. But early years was certainly thought to be a particularly significant focus for issues where young children were living in particular circumstances of poverty, or where attachment wasn't necessarily the major focus of their upbringing. And there was a recognition that attachment was a very serious issue for these particularly vulnerable children. And as a result, there was a lot of work that was gone into to try and help those in the sector understand that attachment policy was not something to be looked beyond, but it was a valuable exercise in supporting particularly vulnerable young children, where their families were in a state of chaos for whatever reason. And in Scotland, that's invariably to do with poverty, or issues around particular vulnerability regarding drugs or alcohol. But the fact that it was seen as something that really needed to be addressed in Scotland was seen as important. So I don't disagree with Ferit's position on attachment theory. I think it's a very valuable position to take. But there's knowledge and experience out there which and I'm sorry that I'm now beyond the point where I can access that information, but it wouldn't be difficult to track down that information and see what will happen in Scotland in terms of the support that was given. There was certainly a lot of work done at a local level, and it was seen as sensible to support families in the first instance, as well as other carers in understanding the principles of attachment. And strangely enough, only today, the issues of attachment theory came home to roost when I was with my granddaughter, and she experienced our first encounter with a relative who she hadn't previously been familiar with, as a young child, and she's only 18 months now. And for the hour that we spent with him, she clung to me and would not look at him and would not have any interaction with anyone else in the room apart from me. And it was only when he left that she finally accepted that he wasn't in the room and was prepared to then go and play with her toys. Now, my daughter said that was stranger danger principles which she was dealing with, and that she will grow out of that eventually, but it's a sensible thing for a child of that age to take if she doesn't know who it is that's there and doesn't understand, that this is a member of her family. But she was sufficiently distressed that she would not let me go. And, she treated me as the person that she, had the greatest attachment to at that point in time. And I suppose that's just simply because I am, next to her parents, the person that she has the greatest relationship with. So it was interesting to see the slides that Ferit produced, and I agreed that that the attachment theory is a really strong principle that we should be adhering to, and that the interest of those children who are most vulnerable and most vulnerable to the loss of attachment it's important that we find a way to establish that point within any education system, not just the English system, not even the Scottish system, but any education system. It's important that those measures are understood, and it's not just for the parents, but for education givers to to recognise that as an important factor.
Yeah, I agree, and I was just quoting from the OECD report for Scotland that's been accepted, was to align the institutional structures with clear ownership of the curriculum for excellence. Scotland could explore assigning leadership and development responsibilities for curriculum and perhaps assessment to a specialist standalone agency, and consider refreshing the remit of an inspectorate of education regarding CFE. But what I'm sort of saying is what I'm grappling with Khalid Arar's conference tomorrow. I'm a keynote for the Turkish conference, is autonomy and how we balance the educational offer from a national policy with a local culturally relevant offer that district agents are bridging and navigating and negotiating, so that teachers understand about attachment theory. Because if we are teaching after the lockdown of a year and isolation and bubbles and so on, if children are in rows, the only time that they're getting a chance to have a relationship again, other than with their significant family at home, and if there's a single parent family, it could be one child and one adult for a year, is they're not even making eye contact with each other in the classroom. And it's when they go out at break, and then there's a lot of frustration and a lot of confusion. And so I'm just thinking in terms of what the OECD is saying, how that might be connected to a COVID-19 recovery, when we're thinking about not just children that, because now we've got 34% poverty in the UK, it's also about children that may have gone through the stages of attachment theory in healthy ways, but are now having to recover from this isolation that they've had, and how we facilitate them in calm, nurturing environments to build relationships again and to heal, and so that they are open to learning. Mayamin, yes, please.
Yeah, sorry. This is where I think that teacher training is so important. Thank you, Ferit, for highlighting the attachment theory and the building confidence which we lack as teachers, that we need to understand that when we train teachers of what's going to happen after COVID-19 or before COVID-19, we train them to give those children confidence. And like you said, Alison, I'm talking about countries like Iraq, which I teacher train over there, Syria, Lebanon, and others. We don't know that theory of teamwork in the classroom. We don't know the ABCDE, and I think a lot of teachers here in the UK don't know it as well. But we do train teachers here in the UK on group work. This is what we always highlight. The thing that we need to go back to start a new year with after COVID-19, where everything is going to be face-to-face. There's no more online. So the first thing we need to think about is teaching the teachers. The teachers are going to come, as like Ferit said, it's the attachment theory. So the teachers, and like Kathleen said, the only person that they know, they see, is that teacher. Kathleen said that her granddaughter only knows her because she's the only one who's attached to that, to Kathleen. That's the face that she knows. The teachers are going to go back not knowing all the students that they had for a year because they've been face-to-face, they haven't seen them face-to-face. So we need to train those teachers going back, what's going to happen, talk about mental health issues that we forget. The only thing we look at when training is how to do a perfect lesson plan, how to train children on good thinking. But we forget to train teachers on if their child has a problem, what do we do? If a child comes from a broken family, or a family with alcohol problems, what do I do? So this is something that we need to remember, that when I'm training teachers, I need to highlight other things. Another thing we need to remember, in the classroom, we give a child's voice, give that child a voice to talk, because the only way to build confidence for that child is when I give him a voice to tell me what's going on. I know we have lots of children that blabber or talk too much and it doesn't make sense, but sometimes when they talk to you, there are hidden things that they want to talk about. So they might say that their family have hit them, smacked them, or they are abusing them. By talking to us, we can pick up these things. So that's the only way that we can build confidence for the children, and build that confidence. It comes through putting these classrooms into groups and making them learn how to work as a group. And the thing that we lack in, I'm talking about Iraq, the country that I teach, train, and I work with. The classroom, we have around 60 students, and the teacher has only around 30 to 40 minutes to teach. And the curriculum is tense and it's big. And if that teacher does not finish that curriculum or does not finish that book, she gets told off or she won't get paid. And that's something that we are struggling in the third world. And this is not only, I've heard this from teachers in Iraq, I've heard this in teachers from Africa and others, that when we look at students, the only thing they do in the classroom is that they have to sit down with their arms folded and the teacher is lecturing. Again, I go back to this point, is that we need to train the teachers on how to do teamwork, how to build confidence for the children. And like Ferit's just highlighted, attachment theory, these theory that we teachers read or knew about, or saw psychology that they took when they were studying to be teachers, and then they forget when they are in service or in the field of teaching. Thank you.
Mayamin, I think that's crucial. And if we are developing children to engage with the labour market and propel local entrepreneurial economies with mama and papa shops, or, you know, building local infrastructure with money raised from taxes once they start to generate an income, it's going to be crucial that they can be people who can relate to each other, who can build relationships, who have successfully passed through the stages of attachment theory and don't have blockages. Because when you do have those blockages, that can lead to really problematic personality disorders when they're older. And you know, that this can be, you know, very much about ego, as opposed to being someone who is a team player who wants to facilitate everybody's success. And when we look at Adam Smith and we look at liberalism, you know, it is important to be an entrepreneur, to be able to build yourself out of feudalism, but at the same time there needs to be rewards for that person. You know, so it's a balance, isn't it, between being in the labour market in healthy ways, but also being autonomous, self-determining. And my concern is, where is that in PISA? Because if we keep assessing things like home language, science and maths, those are not the kinds of qualities and characteristics that are the ones that lead to social cohesion, peace and local entrepreneurial economies. And the kind from the EU conference that I was fortunate enough to be participator of it in Saturday, everyone could be part of that conference. It was open to the world through the links. And you could actually send messages as well. And to hear all those leaders talk about how they are committing to refreshing the EU and the laws to understand how they can work for equality, and the 95 billion euros they're putting into research and development with Horizon Europe. This kind of investment is about grassroots up, listening to the participants, listening to the members, the citizens. And if we're going to do that, the citizens are going to need the competencies to do that. And those competencies are not the competencies that you see in the PISA League tables with math, science and home language. So I think what we're looking at is, yes, we need the assessment outcomes, but maybe we need to start looking at how we can make assessments for developing relationships and collaboration for problem solving. Ferit, what do you think?
I think that during the situation, the teacher has the money to be supported for the therapeutic groups, and so in this ideal would be to withdrawn groups, but there is no money for withdrawn groups. So ABCDE offers a tool to develop inquiry approach. Children are often seated in a row, and so we can develop another tool that is ABCDE, and through that we have make this about no money. Quality of relationship, the thinking and engagement with tasks rather than quality, not quantity. For quality of relationship, the thinking and engagement with tasks rather than quantity. So it's necessary that to be the children face to face, to communicate with another, to make questions, so they can develop the relationship and to eliminate the problems.
And what kind of assessment do we need? Because if we're just marking lots of books,
yeah,
what do you think?
For assessment, we can use the index of healthy we can use in the index of healthy relationships that is some measurements for every age, and but more is that we to meet the need. If everyone meets the needs, we can say that is realized the relationship.
So if we have an index of healthy relationships, that maybe the children can also progressively review themselves and get to know themselves as developing their personality and character. But also I think teachers may give less feedback, but feedback that's formative about what they need to improve or address misconceptions, so that there are no gaps in their foundation and they're ready to learn the next thing. Because if we're just marking books and giving them back and the children never look at that marking, then that's an opportunity to learn that we're losing. And we don't know if we're just putting more knowledge and more knowledge and more knowledge on to the children when they haven't actually got the foundations that, you know, really solid in their knowledge of and their application of that knowledge in the real world. Mayamin, you're nodding.
Yeah, I think this is a brilliant question, and thinking about how do we assess children, or our future children, which is the 21st century, and what the UN wants, and that is in SDG 2030. Like you were saying, we should look at ways of assessing the children, and the only way that we can do this is probably by changing the curriculum. I'm talking about the Middle East, MENA region, and it shouldn't be just one book. It should be a practice book. In this practice book, where the topic is, we can have assessment which examines or marks or assess. This is the collaboration, the good questioning, which is ABCDE. So I think that should be implemented in the assessment part of the teaching and the objectives and the aims that would come out of this session. I think this means that we have to again look at all the syllabus, they look at the curriculum, look at the books and how they function. Are these books that we are teaching in the classroom, are they the 21st century books for the children? I'm looking at the third world, of course, and at the same time I'm looking at the Eastern European country, which I had a look at, and I've seen some of my colleagues that we train over there as well. They are going through the same thing, the same lack. It's that book we teach, they get examined on. And there isn't that extra practice books. So if I had to change the books, I would have a topic that the teacher would teach, and then I would assess through these activities, which is A, B, C, D, which is good questioning, good collaboration, critical thinking, and so on. And I would tick these boxes. So that I'm glad you agree with me.
Yeah, I agree with
and
you.
I would tick those boxes. These what these A, B, C, C, D, E, F. Okay, I've done that. And the 4 C's and the embedding of technology, because we are moving from the children sitting there, not interacting, using the iPads. Have the children done that? So as a teacher in the classroom, as a facilitator, I am now. I'm not going to be the teacher like when I was little, the teacher, you would just stand there and dictate to us. No, I would be the facilitator, giving these things and these opportunities. And this is A, this is B, this is C, this is D, this is E. This is all embedded in that. And I would take those papers and I would just mark that I have done this. I have created that that confidence in that child. I've done the ABCDE. I have looked at the PISA that they want, or the OCDE. So it's reflected into my sessions, into my lessons. I think this is what I think.
Yeah, I agree with you. And important is that the pupil to act and not to know what is E and what is B and what is C. And the teacher will create the learning situation, and through making the lesson to make parallel and ABCD. And so the pupil communicate and action one to another, and so create relationships.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the only way we can create a relationship, like you said, Ferit. Creating a relationship. This only can happen through the children interacting. How do they interact? Is by giving a brilliant lesson with the activities, like you said, the activities A, B, C embedded into it. Because no teacher knows ABCD. If I just went to any school in the UK or anywhere and I tell them, do you know ABCDE? They look at me. Do you know the 21st century theory of teaching? They look at me in a weird way. But if I tell them, okay, this is what it is. If you have this topic, this is how ABCDE, or the 4 C's, critical thinking, collaboration, the communication, the creativity is through highlighting these points in your session. I think that's the only way forward.
Yeah.
Because at the end, we need to give that child and build confidence. And like Kathleen said, we need to start with early childhood, which is starting from nursery, primary, and we build that confidence. So we start with the lesson plans, with the ABCs embedded into their learning from an early age. So when that child from early age, 3 years old, and we have developed those ABC into them, when they get to year 13 or year 12 in MENA and Middle East and other countries, they are ready. They are ready, like Alison said, ready for the workforce. They are ready. They know what they want. They know what they do. Not like us nowadays. We push our children to what we think is good, what the job market is good, or what our culture wants. So if we're looking at my culture is medicine, pharmacy, dentistry, engineer, and the rest is nothing. No, let our children be the ones who choose what they want, what they liked, what they've seen that fits their personality, which we have stopped them having this identity and personality because we go into the classroom and we force the children not to talk, not to be engaged, not to have teamwork, and they don't have that identity for them to say what they feel, what's going on with them.
I would absolutely agree. I mean, I think that in any culture, that should be a focus for the upbringing of children. And, you know, it's sad that we've found ourselves in a situation that in different countries there is such a closed position on what should be the career path of any child. I would agree that for children who are in early years, that they're getting that support, not just from 3, however, but from the point at which they start to interact with others beyond their immediate parents and carers, that if we start to support the particularly vulnerable children, then the capacity for development and that is something that, you know, has been talked about in Scotland for some time, that the development of the brain has been has been a particular focus for some time, and that the ability to make sure that children who are particularly vulnerable don't you know, end up, you know, in the same vicious circle that perhaps their parents have been in. And so, you know, if we can find a way to break that and turn that into a virtuous circle, then, you know, we will see, you know, progression beyond the difficulties that such children face. And obviously that's different in different parts of the world, and, you know, we have to recognise that there is no one solution for all parts of the world, but at the same time there are fundamentals that should and could be followed, and you know, if we take that measure in mind, then, you know, we would start to make some progress. And if, you know, if children understand that they are, I suppose, from the early stages being respected, I suppose is maybe the best way to put that, you know, that they're being respected and they are given the opportunity to make decisions on their own part, and understand that the teacher is not there just simply, as you say, to mark books, but there to support them, then, you know, we potentially make progress. The difficulty, I suppose, and I've having listened to some of the policy decisions in this part of the world, there are so many policies, almost too many policies around education that don't allow the capacity for a child to develop without having been through a kind of you know, maze of different things that they are expected to deliver. I do agree that there should and could be areas where they get the choice of what they want to do, without being, you know, made to feel as if they are taking a secondary, or not a secondary, but a less favoured path, because we do recognise that there are children who don't necessarily have the capacity to do every degree that there is in the, you know, on offer, but there should be opportunities for them to explore what they do feel comfortable doing, and therefore, you know, then, you know, make a career choice for themselves beyond that. But, yeah.
Yeah, like you said, Kathleen, now, because I've been going to lots of conferences, and the UN and the world are now advocating, or they are voicing no child left behind. So the equity, the word equity everywhere that you go is there. So like you said, we shouldn't leave any child. We shouldn't be, the first thing that we should think about is the vulnerable children, the children that need our support, the children that need help. We should start with them. And at the same time, we should not forget the other children who are the ones who are very bright, the ones that we need to push to make them. And like you said, we need, because at the end, the workforce, we don't want everybody to be a doctor. We want a doctor, and we want a cleaner. We want a canteen, somebody who makes us sandwiches for those doctors. I mean, everybody is a force, everybody is equal, everybody has the right to work and be proud of their work and have money at the end to pay their bills and feed their children. So and this starts, like you said, starts with early years, when we need to train our teachers to make them aware of what's going on. And at the same time, when we have teachers who are aware of what's going on, the children will be aware, because when the teacher is there, and like you said, she's going to be the place where it's going to be attachment theory. So they are going to idolize that teacher. Whatever that teacher says is true to them, because that's the person who is telling everything, or who's in the authority, we can say. And then that teacher will start to build that confidence in that child, and that child will come to us and say, I want to be an artist. I don't want to be a teacher, or I don't want to be a doctor, I want to be this. And then from there, we can push that child, or help that child. We don't want to say push. We help that child to progress in the thing that he loves or she loves. And it can be anything, and anything in this world is important to us. I mean, in 2019, when COVID hit us, the people who were behind the screen in computers, we didn't know them until COVID hit us, and they started to show their work, and they started to teach us about Zoom and all that. And I'm one of those people. I am education technology, And people didn't know me until 2019, and I became so famous about education technology, embedding technology in teaching. And I've been talking about this and advocating this since 2010 when I was doing my master's degree. But then I was forgotten, you know, oh, okay, we'll do this, it's not important, until 2019, when technology became important. So we shouldn't, like we said, we shouldn't leave anybody behind, because everybody is important to us and we need them to move this world. And we need to work towards ABCDE. We need to work towards the SDG 2030, wherever part of the country, the world you are, we need to all work together to move this world.
I think that's incredible, Mayam, that you have shared with us. And I think issues of power are really important, because when we look at the 4 competencies for the Scottish curriculum, we look at effective contributors. That means we're developing children as stakeholders, as having voice. If we're just talking to them and giving them information that they've got to memorize and regurgitate in tests for PISA to get your high stakes tests and to get high league tables, it's not developing people who are participating in their social contract, in local government, you know, and you know, they begin to get their kind of service from bookies, from, you know, things that cause addictions, because they haven't become confident, they haven't become effective contributors, because that's not what the pedagogy and assessment for learning is focusing on. They're not becoming confident individuals. They're becoming people who, if their first university sort of they've got there for the first time in their family, they're dropping out. They haven't got resilience, they haven't got self awareness or the self-confidence to know I'm good enough. And we empower children. And I don't think teachers should be the locus of power. I think they should be people that say, how do you feel about this? It doesn't matter what I think. I want you to tell me how you feel. Do you think this works good enough? And if they say yes, because I always say, you know, a great leader, if they're in a desert, they need to be able to survive 40 nights, 40 days, whatever. And they've got to be able to give themselves an inside tick. There's not going to be someone there to say, I think you're doing a good job. Well done. You're getting 100%. Here's an A. Because, you know, when things are tough, they've got to find their own ways, whether that will be through a faith or no faith. But it's their spiritual life, their relationship with themselves, that we can develop through religious education, through philosophy, through all faiths and none. And I don't see that as being a massive part of them becoming successful learners, because learning is about, you know, taking an identity, gaining new information, applying that information, and their identity changing. So learning is about a change in identity, a becoming a personality, the person, the narrative that they can be successful. And that develops responsible citizens, which is ABCDE. And if those are the 4 key parts of the Scottish Curriculum for Excellence, you know, how is that being delivered when we're looking at PISA? Because that's not what PISA is assessing. It doesn't assess any of these anywhere. And I think if we are really preparing people for the local economies and to build good lives and to be grassroots up participators of science with and for society for human evolution, so that the university staff are working for the people, not thinking the people are a problem. Because as I've said before, the poverty gaps have got wider. And I don't think that government are listening to policy research from the universities, because governments seem to be focusing on ideologies rather than evidence, logic and ethical frameworks. So I think we need to perhaps review how these successful criteria of successful learners, confident individuals, effective contributors and responsible citizens are being assessed by PISA, and saying to PISA, please, will you help us develop grassroots up citizens who can participate in the social contract and work for peace and prosperity for all, and know how to work for the Sustainable Development Goals. rather than knowing how to work for something else.
So true, yeah. Like you said, the universities needs to have a role in building the community, which we have started. Inshallah, will start in 2020 when everything goes back to normal. The University of Qatar, where I work, will be having a QU hub, where we will be working at the university. Will be the heart of the community, where we train teachers, then we take them, we put them into schools, and then anybody who needs help in training, building their confidence as teachers, they go back to the university, because like you said, the university is the hub for the research, and the only way that the knowledge can go and be implemented into the schools is through research, and this is what we are thinking of. So whatever we do as researchers at the university, we'll implement it into the schools, and the school is the heart of the community, because this is where the children live and work, and their families are. So that's what we are going to be doing. So again, the teachers, any teacher, any parent in the community that need help, they can go back to the university hub, and there we as lecturers are there to support those people, the parents, the teachers in service, the teachers student teachers. So we will be, again, the heart of that community and working towards that community as well. Because without the research, without us knowing what's going on, no way the community will move forward. And then again, we go back to the teachers not being trained, not knowing what's going on in the 21st century. What's the latest research? What's the latest implementation to use in the classroom to make those children ready for the workforce? Because teachers are forgotten people. They are the what can we say, the silent soldiers or the silent people. They are working, bless them. Even COVID-19, a lot of people stayed at home. They're the ones who are still working. And I'm one of them. We never had a day off. Now it's my summer holiday, and here I am again, still working behind the screen, I'm still working with a lot of projects. Here I am with you guys, because we are literally the soldiers that never sleep. I think we will stop working until we die. I think that's what it is. And we never stop giving. We never stop giving. That's the thing. When you're a teacher, it's a label that you have, or something that you have till you die, whatever age you are. So again, like you said, research, action, research, mentoring, that these things that are just coming up now, the new things, that's the new norm that teachers need. We don't forget the teachers, like we don't want to forget the children, because when we have good trained teachers, we're going to have good students, good schools, good leaders, good community, good countries, and good world.
But I think that comes from Qatar, which was the Center for Peace, and it has one of the highest GDP per capita. And my PhD student did some research in the Middle East, and I think what they're looking at in Qatar is outreach, amazing outreach, because it's turning into a knowledge economy, because of, the income from oil is, that is shifting more towards, let's build alternative ways of generating income. And I think it's about language, it's about citizens, it's about expats, it's about male and female, evolving gender relationships, and it's all happening in Qatar. Very exciting place to be right now, Mayamin. And it is a hub of research, and they're amazing people there.
Yes.
Yeah. Ferit, what do you think about the conversation, the discussion you've stimulated from your presentation?
A good conversation between us, and very good thoughts in the discussion of the persons in the conference. So interesting to discussion time after time, so to exchange experiences, good experience.
Well, you're really lucky to have you to present, Professor, and we do appreciate. But educational
Thank you
psychology,
very
it's
much.
not recognised perhaps as it should be. Kathleen, would you like to add anything?
I think this has been a really interesting session this evening, and you know, I think there's a lot of common currency, I think, around, you know, the four of us here tonight who are listening to this. As I say, a lot of this does come back to resources for undertaking such support from early years through to the different stages of education, because if you have a child who doesn't get that support at the early years of their lives and moves into the primary phase of education, there may be aspects of what, you know, are happening to them through those first 7 years, which make it, you know, difficult for them to then, you know, make progress beyond that. So there may be additional support that will need to be given to that child, and the same goes for you know, the next 6 years potentially, once they move into the sort of the more sort of formal phase of their education, you know, within the system. And, you know, it doesn't really matter which country you're referring to. It's, you know, if we don't have the resource, you know, to support that individual child, regardless of where they come from, then, you know, that is a child lost to the system, lost to the workforce, lost to the society. And, you know, the capacity for that child to support itself as an adult then becomes compromised. So, you know, we owe it to ourselves, I think, in terms of the future workforce, that we do everything we can to support our children through this process.
Absolutely. And I know that if we are fortunate enough to have a teaching assistant, you know, in early years, when I was teaching in early years, we would just spend so much time just talking, doing puppet shows, because some children came into school just not speaking, and they could speak and they started speaking, and they loved talking then. But I think Mermin said maybe they're talking things that, you know, perhaps don't make sense, but this is how we connect concepts to the concrete reality of the real world, and they need to explore their language. And so I'm excited to listen to children talk.
Yeah,
you know, because that's how they develop their ability to write.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm listening to my granddaughter, you know, in the last week, where she's now progressed from referring to every adult that she has within her sphere of interest as daddy. It's now become mummy. But she looks at photographs of the family, the immediate family, the people that she's closest to, and she sees my husband in the picture, and I say, "That's Papa, Papa," she said. And that's the first time I've heard her say that. We haven't quite got to Nana yet, but it'll come. It will come. But it's listening to the progress in her vocabulary, knowing that she wants to say things but hasn't quite grasped how to do it yet. But she's so close, and once she starts, it will all emerge, and we will have no peace until she stops, because we know that she's going to be a talker, and it will be phenomenal, I think, to witness that.
I remember Tim Brighouse, who was very significant in Birmingham and then in the London Challenge, really focused on vocabulary, and he said it's one of the greatest indicators for children that will build narrative capital and have successful pathways to middle class benefits and to success. So I think it's so important. It's
lovely to watch, and it's interesting that she watches programs where there's a particular children's program, and I won't advertise it here, but there's a particular program where the use of Makaton is used. And it's Makaton is a particular type of language used where there is a hearing disability, and it's interesting because there was a focus on different languages, what was called 1+2 in Scotland a few years ago, and I'm not quite sure where it's reached at the moment, but there were a number of schools, number of councils who were using or introducing Makaton into the language, you know, suite, I suppose, because it was seen as something important, not just in terms of communication with other children with hearing disabilities, but because it provided skills in terms of a different language, which would potentially encourage a child to think about another language, and, you know, help them to focus on, oh, well, this is a language in itself, but there might be other languages that I might want to learn about, and it would stimulate their interest in doing so. I have a particular interest in that because I tried to encourage my two children to learn another language when they were small, and I think there's great value in it because it's not just about, you know, learning a lot of words. It's about, you know, understanding cultures and you know, the different societies that we live in this world, and, you know, getting them to you know, understand that there is more outside their small sphere of interest that could have a bearing on what they do, you know, later in life. So it's interesting to see her watching that, and occasionally you'll see her making, you know, hand gestures that mimic what the presenter is doing. I think all of these things are, you know, have a great influence, a very positive influence on a child's development.
Well, I think that we've covered a lot of ground today. A lot of really interesting issues that I hope, as we move towards the COVID-19 recovery in terms of understanding the direction of the school systems, we'll be able to apply this and develop, hopefully, people to engage with the social contract and understand what that is, and appreciate, you know, that, as Plato said, the person steering the ship is not always the best person to steer the ship. They may be just the person who can get to the wheel. And maybe the best person for steering the ship doesn't really want to force themselves through to get the wheel. And I think that's worth thinking about in terms of how we construct society and how we value each other in the classroom. Ferit, do you have any final words that you would like to end with your wonderful presentation?
Thank you very much. Thank you. I like too much the discussion of the persons here, and I profit too much. And like this to have too much events. And hope till next time to be face to face in a round table.
It would be lovely. We've got Professor Mark Bointner from Paderborn University in 2 weeks' time. He's giving the keynote, and he's another member of our international EYSIER team. So everybody's welcome to join us for that. It'll be the same time, 7 p.m. On the 6th of July, on the Tuesday. And Professor Mark Bointner is an amazing leader in the field, and led European Union research, particularly on platforms to share science with and for society. So it's very exciting to be working with him. Yeah. So I think if we've got nothing more to add, I'll bring the EYSIER SIG to a close this evening, and just thank you all very much for participating, and without you this wouldn't happen. So thank you, Professor Ferit. Really appreciate you and all the support you've given us over the years. And thank you, Kathleen and Meermin, and hopefully see you in 2 weeks.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. Thank you, Professor Ferit. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I said it was a really interesting session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Bye.
Goodbye.